YouTube, this is Justin, aka Demonic Sweaters, your guide in DIY multimedia production, and today I have a really crazy tutorial for you, and this one's going to be fun though. This is all about using SEQ24 with the jack audio connection kit and jack rack, a effects rack unit for Linux, with software synths, sound fonts, and basically using all this stuff together to create MIDI sequences and to be able to have something that you can use to perform live with a Linux computer or record. I've recorded like this as well, but what this is really cool for one, I mean, you can use soft synths, and the way that I'm doing it in here is actually using Qsynth, which is a sound font player for Linux. It uses Fluid Synth. It's a GUI front end for Fluid Synth, technically. And if you look in here on my jack audio connection kit, you'll see all these instances of Fluid Synth. That's because I have all these different ones loaded into Qsynth right here. And so all of this is going to be basically controlled through this part of the GUI. And boy, I'm really not explaining this well. Okay, let me start over. What all of this stuff is, if you're not familiar at all, is these are basically, this is a modular approach to working with music in Linux. And what SEQ24 is, I'll start with this one. SEQ24 is a very kind of bare bones MIDI sequencer. And I say bare bones, but it's actually very cool. And I'll show you why here in a little bit. But, okay, we'll just leave it at that for now for SEQ24. Qsynth, this is loading all of my sound fonts. And my sound fonts being my synthesizer sounds that I am using for this demonstration. You could also be using hardware synths, you know, connected to your computer, you know, with MIDI cables. And that would work as well. However, this next step really wouldn't be for that unless you're piping audio back into your computer from your hardware synths. But if you're using Qsynth or other software synths, you can actually also incorporate into this whole setup is something called jack rack, which is an effects rack for jack, the jack audio connection kit. And you'll see I have several effects loaded up in here already. And lastly, which is what I should have talked about first, but we have Q jack control, which is the jack audio, the front end to the jack audio connection kit. And this is basically my patch bay in this setup. So I have, if you'll look in here in the ALSA section, this is actually talking about the ALSA MIDI section. You'll see my MIDI through, my nano key, which is hooked up, my Midi Classic USB, which is hooked up, and then jack rack, which is hooked up here as well. And these are all of my inputs. All of my MIDI outputs are actually, these are the MIDI, the writable MIDI clients, or inputs rather, and the outputs are this side. So I said that backwards. But so outputs are over here, and then we have all of the Fluid Synth instances, and then the other MIDI controllers again, and my MIDI control, or MIDI through. So what I'm going to do first off here is I'm going to hook my Midi Classic, which is the one I'm using for this demo, to my MIDI through. And the reason why I'm doing that is if we go to our MIDI tab, MIDI monitor, which is this little thing right here, this is going to be used in a few minutes. I'll show you why we need this. But for the jack rack, basically when we want to be able to set up MIDI controls for our jack rack, then we need the MIDI monitor to figure out what numbers we're going to need to put in there to set up the MIDI controls for that. So now that we have that, this one, the USB Midi Classic, or whichever MIDI controller you're using, I'm using the Midi Classic because, let me just show you here, it has a lot of knobs and faders on it, so I can use that for effects and things like that. Oops, dropped my webcam. Okay, so yeah, so back on what I was talking about, we go back in here to System, and now I'm going to connect System to MIDI monitor, And now when I press a note on my keyboard or turn a dial, you'll see the the CC values and the note values and all that in the MIDI monitor. So, okay, feel like I'm explaining a lot, and I'm not sure how much of this is making sense to you guys, but hopefully you're following me so far. Now let's move back to SEQ24, and what I'm going to do is open up something that I did already, and I can use that as a demonstration. So let's go to open, and this is actually, if you want to hear this full completed thing, I have it on my YouTube channel. If you just search Justin Robert live at Terra, what is it called? Terra something. I'll post the link in the description. But I have this whole thing recorded. It was for a show that I did at a cafe in Bushwick, and I recorded the whole thing. But anyway, okay, so what we're looking at here, SEQ24, like I said before, it's a MIDI sequencer. But what is so cool about this thing is it's really cool to use for live performing. And the reason for that is, if we look, well, first off, each one of these little boxes are different sequences. And if I open up one of these, if I right click it and go to edit, you'll see the sequence right here. And this is your pretty standard piano roll editor. You have your velocity down on the bottom. You can actually change these events. You can do aftertouch, program change, channel pressure, pitch wheel. I usually just keep it on note off, or note on and note off velocity. And okay, to quickly walk you through what all this stuff means here, if we hover the mouse over any of them, it'll tell you, which is useful because it's just symbols. But the important ones are the select output bus, which is this. And if I click that, you'll see all of my different sound font instances, as well as the different MIDI controllers and the MIDI through port and all of that. So if you had like physical MIDI hardware connected to your computer, you could use this to connect these sequences out to that. Now, since I'm using my Kawaii K1 sound font, I have that set up where basically I have different sounds on different channels. So I can use my select MIDI channel to select different sounds. And you'll notice this one is on channel 7. So if I play this back, I just turn that on. To turn it on, you can either click it, or you can press the key, corresponding key to what you see down here in the right corner. If we notice 1, that turns that on. Q will turn on the one below it. A will turn on the one below that. Z will turn on that one, so on and so forth. So let's turn on number 1, and let's just press play. And now that's playing that sequence. We don't actually have to have this open to hear that. Press number 1 again, it'll turn it off. So if I press number 2, now we're going to get my drum sound there. If I do W, some more drums. Okay, so you get the idea. You could trigger those on and off using keys on your keyboard. And so to compose, like say you wanted to create a new MIDI sequence, what you do is you just right click in an empty space and click new. And then here you can either record from your MIDI keyboard. If I press this button, that will record incoming MIDI data. If I press the incoming MIDI data passes through key, you can just play and practice. So first off, I have to make sure that my nano key, I'm also using the nano key here. I have to make sure that this, oh no, sorry. I have to make sure that the output is going to something or I won't hear anything. So let's go ahead and put this on the K1. Now if I'm playing something on my keyboard, you'll hear it. And it actually should work on either keyboard. Actually, no, it's not. So for some reason, that's only going there. But I don't want to get you too confused. So I'm confused enough. But okay, so if you wanted to create a new sequence here, you could either record it by playing this back and having record enabled here, and you can also have quantize record, which will automatically quantize the notes you play. Or you could actually just write it in, if we stop this, via the piano roll editor. And to do that, you just right-click, and then you'll get a pencil icon, and you can just draw things in there. To change the length of these notes, you can select right here. You can select note length, and you can either do whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and do half note. And let's just write some in here. And let's just do a half note for the first one, and then let's do a couple of quarter notes. I don't know if this will sound on key, but it's just for a demonstration. Alright, so let's play this back. And now to play that sequence, we just click this while it's playing. Now say if I wanted to have a different sound on this one, I can actually switch my MIDI channel. Okay, now those sounds are obviously going to be determined by whatever you're plugged into via your MIDI connection. So if you were going out to a hardware synth and whatever MIDI channels you had set up for any particular sound, if it's a multi-timbral instrument, like the actual K1, you could do this with an actual K1 hardware synth. And then you could send out different channels and control different items. And there's a lot of multi-timbral synths. I think the Yamaha, or several Yamahas did it. And, many of them do it. It's just one of those things. But getting sidetracked again. It's very easy to do with this stuff. But, okay, so let's close this. That's how you create a new sequence if you want to. And then say you have all this stuff going and you have let me just delete this one because it doesn't really belong in here. If you have all this stuff set up and say then you want to have effects on some of these sounds, well, that's where Jack Rack comes in. Jack Rack is basically for using real-time effects with Jack, and all it does is it just loads plugins. So when you open up Jack Rack, this is what you're going to get. And Jack Rack is just JACK-RACK, and you can install it the usual ways. Sudo apt-get install Jack Rack. Okay, so once you have Jack Rack up and running, what you can do then is we can go to our audio tab in our Q-Jack control, and I already have it hooked up here, but you see how I have my K1 software, or my K1 sound font going into Jack Rack and inputs 1 and 2, and then from Jack Rack, if I open this up, this is going out 1 and 2 to my system. So now when I play back anything through the K1, if I play this, this is actually passing through my Jack Rack. So if I enable this G-verb, let's see what happens. So now we have some reverb. Now what gets really cool about this, let me scroll back up here to the top. Oops. And let me just show you what I'm doing right now. You notice that fader is moving. And then if you look down here on my G MIDI monitor, let me stop this again. What I'm actually turning is a knob on my Midiplus Classic 49 controller, and what is happening then is I actually mapped that knob to this control, this pitch shift control right here. So the way to do that, all you need to do is you just click whichever control you want to automate via MIDI, and then you just click Add MIDI Control. Now if we go into my MIDI controls that I already set up, you'll see the AM pitch shifter controller right there. Now, see, the problem with this is when you map the control, it doesn't actually figure out which controller, you know, right here. If we go back here to our MIDI monitor, you see 74. It doesn't know that number by itself. This is why we need the G MIDI monitor, or any other MIDI monitor should work. But so that way you can figure out which control you need to change, or you need to enter into here to get our control into Jack Rack. So in order to do that, all you have to do is just double click in there, then you can just type it in. So basically what you do is you turn the knob that you want to figure out. In this case it was 74. See, I'm turning this knob over here, and that is showing 74 right here as the CC control value. And then in MIDI controller, I just double click in here and I type in 74. Now that will control that. So let me just show you one, you know, as if it were the first time we were doing it. So if we go in here, let's add a new effect. Let's go to, I don't know, tape delay simulation. Not real-time compatible, whatever. I'll add it anyways. Live dangerously. Okay, so say we wanted to change or automate, or map, rather, not automate, map our tape speed to a MIDI control. We just go to add MIDI control, and now we have, you'll see the tape delay simulation tape speed in the list. But notice MIDI controller just defaults to 1, but we don't want 1. Let's say I want, you know, this controller right here, my last knob on my MIDI controller. I want that one set up. So what I do is I turn that knob, then I look on my G MIDI MIDI monitor, and then I figure out which value is going there. And right now I have 21, or is showing up in there. So all I do is I double click in here, and then I just type in 21. And well, I can't use that because I already used 21 on this one. So let's pick another value. Let's see, 91. I can use that. Oh, no, I used that one already too. Maybe one of my... Okay, 19 I didn't use yet, so let's use 19. Alright, so now after you type that in there, you just click OK. And now, when I'm moving fader 19, which is this one, it moves my tape speed level. So let's go ahead and play back a sequence. Then let's enable tapes. And that one doesn't sound so great because it's not real-time compatible, and that was the warning that it gave me. But you get the idea. So what this does is this opens up a lot of possibilities of being able to control things, you know, with your hands while you're doing something live. So you can actually have, you know, sequences going on and off via your keyboard on your computer. And you could be changing effects with your MIDI controller. In addition to that, you can also be playing, you know, you can have your MIDI controller as well connected to any of these synths. Say we have our, you know, K1 again, we can connect to that. And now I can play along, you know, or improvise on my K1, or my K1 sound font. If I want to change sounds, then I can just go to my MIDI channels and then select a different MIDI channel and get a different sound. So this is basically how if I'm doing an electronic gig, this is how I do it. I use just a combination of sound fonts and SEQ24 and effects, and then I have Midi controls set up that allow me to manipulate things in real time. Now, SEQ24 can also be used to compose songs, and to do that, you just go into this song editor. And then at this point, it's really easy, and it's pretty basic, but I have made some music this way, even on some of my albums I've released. All you have to do at this point is just open up this song editor, then you right-click, and it turns into the pencil, and then you just draw in where you want these sequences to be. And if you play this back, it'll start triggering these wherever they're drawn. So if we, draw that there, and then draw another one here, and then let's just do a couple like this. And you'll see what I mean. So let's play this back. So hopefully that gave you some idea as to what all of this is doing, and hopefully this made sense. I know this is a lot of stuff on the screen, and a lot of it's very little, but it's not that difficult. I mean, you just have to think about it in like a modular sense. Like, if you think about all of these little things as different pieces of hardware, then it's pretty easy. And that's one of the cool things about it, and one of the things I like about working this way. And yeah, that's pretty much all. Hopefully you found this educational and entertaining. If you did, please click like and subscribe, and leave a comment if you have any questions. If you want me to go over anything else in more detail and more depth, go ahead and just let me know down below, and I'll make a tutorial on it. I really like making stuff that helps people understand how to do all this stuff. And I know fluid synth or Qsynth, that is a very big topic on its own, and I could do some of that at some point. There are some pretty good tutorials on YouTube about creating sound fonts, but it can get extremely complicated to do that, so I didn't want to touch on that on here, but I do have some information on that as well. And yeah, that's all for now. So thanks for watching, and hopefully you like this video, and yep, talk to you later.